With a husband who was physically present, self-indulgent but disengaged from the needs of his wife and children, emotionally numb, and unwilling to acknowledge his part of the problem, help me or seek help for himself. The chronic invalidation and lack of connection was like kryptonite to the fear of abandonment at the core of my mental health issues. The next 2.5 years were the worst of my life. My penchant for dramatic flair and exaggeration notwithstanding, it's true. My personal highway to hell was paved with my first therapy client stories of the most heartbreaking and gut-wrenching traumas and tragedies that I'd ever heard. All while our family was reeling from our own confusing and tragic events. This story is for another time, stamped with a trigger warning for child abuse. I felt like I was stuck on a roller coaster careening through a horror funhouse with off-balance wheels, sparks flying at every turn, no safety bar, being thrown against the sides of the car over and over, horrific images burned into my eyeballs a la Clockwork Orange, with no escape. I survived by hyper-focusing on my children's and clients' well-being, shushing my own system's cries for help, numbing with weed, ignoring my husband ignoring me. The lockdown of March 2020 was an ironic savior. My crafty side delighted in sewing custom masks in bright materials. My creative inner child delighted in chalking pictures of suns and rainbows, and messages such as "Look up, the sky is blue," all over our neighborhood. My personal favorite was an hour my son and I spent filling a family friend's driveway with "It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine," with a stick figure portrait of their family looking joyful. My rebellious side loved hopping fences into playgrounds with my children, tearing caution tape off of slides and swings. The horror coaster calmed as hidden parts of myself emerged. My nervous system felt less raw, more regulated, stuck together at home and tag-teaming childcare to attend to our respective virtual work like so many parents during spring of 2020 was like paddling a two-person canoe. When the front and rear paddlers aren't in sync, arguments occur or escalate. They're called divorce boats for a reason. One particularly heated argument full of personal attacks exposed just how out of sync my husband and I were. I could feel myself spiraling into the familiar internal chaos of dysregulated emotions. I was climbing back on the roller coaster, ready to protect myself with rage, to be out of control. As he had done so many times before, he turned and walked away, left the room, left me alone to deal with the brewing storm inside of me, and took shelter in the proximity of our child. And as I had done so many times before, I followed him, though this time felt different because I could feel. I wasn't dissociated. My senses were engaged. My feet connected with the soft low-pile carpet. The cartoons on the TV weren't muted, but squeaky and boisterous. The shapes of plants in the sunlit backyard were crisply defined. It was a moment of clarity, a moment of dull ache. Something had weakened my usual protective wall of rage, leaving me vulnerable to really feel the emotions that had been masked over the past 9 years. Fear quickened my heartbeat. Disgust twisted my gut. Sadness stuck in my throat. I walked over to where my husband sat next to our son on the couch, stopped within conversational distance. He glanced at me sideways with an "I dare you" look. He was expecting further friction, argument, escalation. Then he went back to pretending to watch the cartoon on the TV. In a subtly choked and surprisingly calm voice I asked him, "Counseling or mediation?" In hindsight, I can see that I didn't speak the words marriage and divorce in a kind of higher knowing that the power was in the unspoken. He answered flatly, "Mediation." His eyes didn't move from the TV. In that moment I knew the chasm between us would never be crossed. That any future efforts to overcome the distant nature of our relationship and grow a healthy family would be in vain. We were headed into the end of our marriage, the beginning of our divorce, a life of split households, custody negotiation, co-parenting logistics, and a whole lot of unknown. I said, "Okay," turned and walked away, left the room, and went to be alone with the storm inside of me.